The funeral home smelled like white lilies and central heating, and the particular kind of quiet that only exists in rooms where everyone is pretending to be calmer than they are. My grandfather's service was held on a Thursday morning in March in a small chapel in Knoxville, Tennessee, that he had attended for 41 years. The pews were full. He had been that kind of man. The kind whose absence fills a room more completely than his presence ever could, because presence can be taken for granted, but absence cannot. I sat in the third row, not the first. The first row was reserved for my mother, my brother Daniel, and Daniel's wife, Patrice, who had driven down from Cincinnati in a car my mother had helped pay for. They sat close together, my mother in the center, one hand in Daniel's, the other pressed flat against her collarbone the way she pressed it when she wanted people to know she was feeling something deeply. I had driven down alone from Asheville. 6 hours. I had not been asked to sit in the front row. I had not been told not to, either. I had simply arrived and understood the way I had always understood things in my family, by reading the arrangement of bodies in a room and locating the space where I was least expected to be, third row. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at the front of the chapel, where a photograph of my grandfather at 62 smiled at all of us from an easel. He was standing on the dock of the lake house in that photo, holding a fishing rod, squinting into the summer sun. He looked exactly like himself. The service was ordinary in the way good services are. Hymns, a reading, a eulogy from the pastor who had known him since the 90s. My mother wept at the appropriate moments. Daniel kept his jaw tight and his eyes dry, the way men in my family performed grief. I sat in the third row and thought about the last conversation I'd had with my grandfather, 6 weeks ago. A Sunday afternoon phone call. His voice had been slower than usual, more deliberate, the way people speak when they are choosing words for reasons they don't explain. "Eleanor," he had said, "I want you to know that I see you. I have always seen you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise after I'm gone." I had not known what to do with that sentence. I had thanked him and changed the subject, because sitting with being seen had never come naturally to me. It was not something I had been given enough practice at. Now, sitting in the third row, I understood that he had known something I hadn't. He had known what was coming, and he had prepared for it. My name is Eleanor Marsh, and I am 38 years old. And I have known since approximately the age of 9 that I was the disposable child. I did not learn this from a single event. I learned it the way children learn most important things, gradually, through accumulation, through the slow sediment of 1,000 small moments that settle into understanding before you have the vocabulary to name what you know. My brother Daniel is 4 years older than me and has been, for as long as I can remember, the organizing principle of our family, not because he demanded it. Because my mother decided it, early and completely, with the quiet authority of a woman who has made up her mind and sees no reason to revisit the decision. Daniel was the one who mattered, not cruelly stated, never cruelly stated. In fact, it was stated in the language of love and priority, and doing what was best for the family. It was stated in the way my mother drove 2 hours to watch Daniel's high school baseball games, and sent me a text on the day of my college graduation that said, "Proud of you, honey. Traffic was bad. Photos?" It was stated in the way she co-signed Daniel's first business loan without hesitation, and told me, when I asked for help with a security deposit on my first apartment, that she and my father needed to be careful with money right now. It was stated most directly one afternoon when I was 19, and had come home for a weekend and overheard my mother on the phone in the kitchen. "Eleanor will be fine," she was saying. "She's the resilient one. Daniel needs more from us, and that's just the way it is. Some children are built for it, and some aren't. Eleanor's the disposable one in that sense." Disposable. I stood in the hallway with my coat still on and my bag over my shoulder and let the word locate itself inside me. I did not confront her. I did not cry. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of my childhood bed and looked at the wall and understood, finally and completely, the architecture of my family. Daniel needed. I managed. Daniel was invested in. I was expected to return on my own. Daniel was the legacy. I was the proof that the family could also produce someone functional and self-sufficient, and quiet enough not to require anything. Disposable, not a wound she had meant to inflict. I genuinely believed that then, and believe it now. She had simply said out loud the organizing principle she had always operated by, the same way people state facts about the weather, without malice, without awareness that the weather might be listening. I left for Asheville 2 months after that and built a life there with the specific intentionality of someone who has been told, implicitly and then explicitly, that no safety net exists. I became a landscape architect. I started my own firm at 31. I designed public parks and green corridors and urban gardens that people walk through without knowing my name, which suited me fine because I had never needed my name known. I just needed the work to exist. I called my grandfather every Sunday. He was the one person in my family who asked questions and waited for the answers, who remembered what I had told him the week before and followed up, who said that sounds hard when things were hard, and I'm proud of you when things went right, without qualifying either statement to warning or redirecting the conversation toward Daniel. He was the one person who had always treated me like I counted, and now he was gone. And I was sitting in the third row. The reading of the will was scheduled for the afternoon following the service, in a conference room at the law office of my grandfather's attorney, a methodical man named Warren Cole, who wore the same gray suit I suspected he wore to everything, and spoke with the measured patience of someone who had delivered news of every possible kind, and learned to do so without inflection. There were 5 of us present: my mother, Daniel, Patrice, me, and my Aunt Ruth, my grandfather's younger sister, who was 81 and sharp-eyed, and had driven herself from Chattanooga, and refused my offer to help her with her coat. Warren Cole opened his folder. He read the preliminary language that attorneys read. He allocated the smaller items, the lake house furniture, the fishing equipment, a collection of first edition books, with the efficient tidiness of a man working through a list. Then he stopped. He looked up. Before I read the primary provisions, he said, "Your grandfather left specific instructions regarding the order of proceedings. He asked that a video recording be played at this point. He recorded it himself 6 weeks ago at this office. He was very clear that it should be seen by everyone present before the financial provisions are read." My mother straightened. Daniel glanced at Patrice. Aunt Ruth looked at me with an expression I could not read. Warren Cole turned a laptop on the table so that its screen faced us, pressed play, and stepped back. My grandfather appeared on the screen. He was sitting in the same conference room we were sitting in now, behind the same table, in front of the same pale wall. He was wearing a blue flannel shirt I recognized. His hands were folded on the table in front of him. He looked directly at the camera with the unhurried certainty of a man who has decided exactly what he wants to say and is not afraid to say it. "Hello," he said. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, which means I don't have to be polite about certain things anymore." I find that clarifying. Aunt Ruth made a small sound, something between a laugh and a sigh. "I want to talk about Eleanor," he said. My mother's hands went still in her lap. "Eleanor is my granddaughter. She is 38 years old. She has built a landscape architecture firm in Asheville that has won 3 state design awards and redesigned the public green space in 4 North Carolina cities. She has done this entirely without family support, financial or otherwise, Because she was not offered any. Daniel shifted in his chair. I want to say something clearly, for the record, in this room, so that there is no interpretation possible after I'm gone. He looked directly at the camera. Eleanor was not disposable. She was never disposable. She was the child this family failed to see, and I did not do enough, while I was living, to correct that. This recording is my attempt to correct it now. The room was completely silent. My mother's hand had moved to her collarbone. I have watched my daughter, and here he paused, and something moved across his face that I had no word for. Something between love and grief, and the particular sadness of a parent who has seen their child do something they cannot undo. I have watched my daughter organize this family around one child's needs for 40 years. I have seen the other child absorb that without complaint and build a life of genuine substance, and worth entirely on her own terms. I am more proud of Eleanor than I have words for, and I am more troubled by what was done to her than I have ever allowed myself to say out loud. Daniel was looking at the table. Patrice was very still. My mother was not crying. She was doing something harder than crying. She was sitting perfectly upright with her hands in her lap, and her face arranged into an expression that was trying to be neutral and not quite succeeding. This is not a punishment, my grandfather continued. I want to be clear about that. This is an attempt at correction. Daniel has received, over the course of his life, substantial financial support from this family, from me, directly, and from his mother. I have documented that support in the attached schedule, which Warren will provide. The total is significant. Warren placed a printed sheet on the table without comment. Daniel reached for it. His face did something complicated. The primary estate, my grandfather said, including the lake house, the investment accounts, and the remainder of my assets, passes to Eleanor, in full, unconditionally, not because I love her more. Because I love her equally, and equality, in this case, requires correction, not division. He unfolded his hands on the table. Eleanor, he said, and now he was speaking directly to me. I understood, as though he had known exactly where I would be sitting, as though he had imagined this moment with precision. You called me every Sunday for 9 years. You asked about my week and remembered what I told you and called back the following Sunday to ask how things had gone. You never asked me for anything. I want you to know that I noticed. I want you to know that I always noticed. My throat closed. Don't be gracious about this, he said, with a trace of the dry humor I had loved about him since I was small. You've been gracious your whole life. You're allowed to simply receive something. That's all. He looked at the camera for one more moment. I love you all, he said, but I see you all. And seeing clearly is the least a grandfather owes his family. The screen went dark. The silence that followed lasted long enough that I became aware of the specific sounds beneath it. The hum of the building's ventilation system, the distant murmur of traffic through the window, the careful sound of Warren Cole turning a page in his folder. My mother spoke first. This isn't. She stopped. He didn't discuss this with me. He was not required to, Warren said. He should have. Another stop. I would have. Margaret. Aunt Ruth's voice was quiet, but it had a quality that stopped things. Don't. My mother looked at her. Don't rewrite it, Ruth said. Not here. Not now. My mother pressed her lips together. Daniel had set down the printed schedule. He was looking at the table with an expression that was doing its best to be unreadable and not quite managing it. He was a man who had spent his whole life in the current of his family's favor and was now experiencing, for the first time, what it felt like to stand on the bank and watch it flow elsewhere. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I felt something quieter than triumph. Something closer to the feeling of setting down a weight you have been carrying. So long, you stopped noticing its presence and only recognize it now. in the sudden lightness of its absence. He had seen me. He had always seen me. And now there was a record of it, documented and irrevocable, in a room where everyone who needed to understand it was sitting. Warren continued reading the formal provisions. I heard them distantly, through the clarity of something that had just shifted permanently inside me. When he finished, he asked if there were questions. No one spoke. The parking lot of the law office was small and gray and March cold, and we moved through it with the specific awkwardness of people who have shared something significant and don't yet know how to carry it back into ordinary space. Daniel caught up with me at my car. I had not expected that. He stood a few feet away with his hands in his coat pockets and his breath making small clouds in the cold air. He looked, for the first time in my memory, like someone who was not entirely sure of his footing. I didn't know he was going to do that, he said. I know, I said. The money he gave me. I didn't think of it as... He stopped. I didn't think about what it looked like from your side. I know that too, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Does that make it better or worse? He asked. That I didn't know? I thought about this honestly. It makes it what it is, I said. Not malicious, just blind. He nodded slowly. The muscle in his jaw moved. He was right, you know, about all of it. I could see it while he was talking. Every example he stopped again. I could see it. Good, I said, not unkindly, just plainly. He looked at me with an expression that was trying to find the right shape for something he had not had to feel before. I'm sorry, Ellie, he said. He had not called me that since we were children. I looked at him for a long moment, my brother, 4 years older, the organized principal, the one who had mattered and known it, and never once thought to question the arrangement, because arrangements that benefit you feel like nature. I know, I said. I opened my car door. Call me, I said, when you're ready to actually talk, not to manage this, just to talk. He nodded. I got in the car. My mother appeared at my window before I could pull out. She stood in the cold with her coat buttoned to the top, her silver hair precise despite everything, her posture, the posture of a woman who has not allowed herself to be physically diminished by anything that has ever happened to her. I lowered the window. She looked at me for a long moment, long enough that I understood she was trying to find the right thing and not finding it quickly. I didn't think of it as disposable, she finally said. When I said that, I thought I was describing a strength. I know, I said. That doesn't make it. She stopped. No, I said. It doesn't. Her hands were clasped in front of her, the same way they had been clasped in the chapel, in the first row, where I had not been sitting. He was always so proud of you, she said. He told me. Many times. I should have. The sentence didn't complete itself. You should have, I agreed. Her eyes were bright. Not with performance, with something that had no audience, which was the version of my mother I had seen the fewest times. I'd like to do better, she said. If you'll let me. I thought about the word disposable. The way it had located itself in me at 19 and stayed there, compact and quiet, for nearly 2 decades. I thought about Sunday phone calls and a man in a flannel shirt looking into a camera with the clear-eyed certainty of someone settling an account. I thought about what my grandfather had said. You're allowed to simply receive something. Come to Asheville, I said. In the spring, I'll show you what I've built. Something moved across my mother's face. I'd like that, she said quietly. I nodded. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove toward the highway, toward Asheville, toward the life I had built in the years when no one was watching. The March sky was low and gray, and the road was long, and the radio played something. I drove with both hands on the wheel, and I drove with hands on the wheel, and the particular steadiness of a person who has just been given back something they did not know they were still missing. Not the money, not the lake house, not any of the formal, documented provisions of an old man's will, just the record, just the proof, irrevocable and witnessed, that someone had seen me clearly, that someone had always seen me, and had made sure, before he left, that everyone else would too.